They said when he was born, he came out crying not for milk, but for puff puff. The nurse almost fainted. His mother, Mama Ino, laughed and said, "Oh, this one go chop life well." From that day, everybody in the compound called him David Chop Life. By the time David could walk, he was already visiting neighbors' kitchens. If he smelled stew, he would appear from nowhere, with that innocent smile that made women forget their annoyance. "Auntie, make I help you turn the soup," he'd say, and before you knew it, 3 pieces of meat had vanished like magic. But don't think David was a thief, oh. No. He was just gifted. Some people are born with the gift of song, others with the gift of wisdom. David's gift was eating, and he took it seriously. His appetite was so mighty that people began to say, "If David Chop Life enters your kitchen, just lock your pot." And that, my people, was how the legend of Lagos' Fattest Man began, though nobody knew yet what destiny was cooking for him. Because in Lagos, when pride and greed mix inside a man's belly, something strange always happens. David had grown taller, rounder, and hungrier. One day, Mama Ino sent him to the market to buy small yam and oil. "Don't waste my money, oh," she warned, pointing her wooden spoon like a soldier's rifle. "And don't go near the food stalls." David nodded, but we all know that kind of promise doesn't last long in Lagos. As soon as he reached the market, the aroma of fried akara floated through the air like sweet perfume. David's eyes turned red with desire. "Oh, just one ball won't harm," he said. But after the first bite, he forgot about home, forgot about yam, and even forgot his mother's warning. He spent all the money, licking his fingers in joy. When he finally returned, his mother asked, "David, where is the yam?" He smiled nervously. The woman say he don't finish." Mama Ino just looked at his greasy lips and sighed. "David, one day, your stomach will teach you a lesson your ears refuse to hear." And that was how David's name began to spread beyond the compound. The market women started whispering, "See that boy way they chop like say him get contract with food." They didn't know yet that his greed would soon invite something far bigger, something not of this world. That evening, as David was strolling home with his belly full and pockets empty, he saw an old woman sitting beside the road near the railway line. Her wrapper was torn, her face wrinkled like dry okra, and in her hand was a small calabash. She called out softly, "Young man, I beg, help me carry this to the other side." David, still wiping akara oil from his mouth, hissed quietly, "Mama, I beg, I no get strength. I dey tired." The woman smiled. "One day, you will find strength where you don't expect it." David ignored her and walked off, not knowing he had just refused to help someone who wasn't quite human. That night, while he slept, David dreamed that the same woman stood over his bed, holding that calabash. Inside it, he saw mountains of food, jollof, goat meat, pounded yam, all steaming hot. She whispered, "Since you love food, let food love you too." Then she laughed, and the sound echoed like thunder. David woke up sweating. His stomach was rumbling louder than a generator. He thought it was hunger, but my people, something deeper had begun in him that night. From that day, David's hunger doubled, tripled, and multiplied beyond sense. He could eat a whole bowl of fufu in one sitting and still ask, "Where's the main course?" Mama Ino was confused. "David, are you okay? You dey chop like say you get 2 stomachs." He started sneaking into neighbors' houses at night to eat leftover food. One day, he was caught trying to lick stew from someone's pot. The landlord shouted, "Oh, David Chop Life done turn food thief." The whole compound laughed, but deep inside, David didn't find it funny anymore. He couldn't stop. At first, people thought it was just greed. But soon, his body began to change. His cheeks grew round, his belly stretched like a balloon, and his clothes cried for mercy. Yet, he kept eating. Even when he wasn't hungry, he would chew something, bread, banana, suya, anything. Then one Sunday morning, while the church bell was ringing, David collapsed in the street clutching his stomach. As people gathered, a strange smell, half food, half perfume, filled the air. "This one no be ordinary hunger," a woman whispered. "No spiritual something." They carried David to Baba Karim, the local herbalist known across Agege for solving mysteries that even doctors feared. Baba Karim looked at David and shook his head. This one don't chop something where no be food." He lit a candle and began to chant words nobody understood. The flame flickered, then went blue. "Aha!" Baba shouted. "He has been marked by the spirit of gluttony." Everyone gasped. Mama Ino started crying. "Baba, help my pikin." Baba Karim mixed 7 herbs in a calabash and told David to drink. "This will slow your hunger, but you must promise, never eat beyond what your hand can carry." David nodded quickly, but as soon as the medicine cooled his belly, he began to dream again of mountains or food calling his name. The next day, he broke the rule. David was invited to a naming ceremony. There was food everywhere: fried rice, egusi, goat meat, puff. The aroma alone could baptize a man. Everyone took small portions, but David filled his plate like someone on a mission. "Ah, David, no competition," his friend Agege laughed. But David couldn't hear, he was lost in chewing. One plate turned to 2, 2 to 4, and soon the cooks began whispering. "Who invited this man?" When the food finished, David wasn't satisfied. He stood up and went straight to the pot, licking stew with his bare hand. The guests stared in shock. The drummers stopped playing. Then, suddenly, his stomach groaned so loudly that even the baby being named started crying. David dropped the spoon and ran out. That night, the spirit of gluttony laughed again in his dream. In his dream, David found himself inside a giant kitchen floating in the clouds. Pots were stirring themselves, meat was frying without fire, and the same old woman appeared again, smiling. "David," she said, "you are my chosen one. You shall never go hungry again." Before he could reply, she touched his belly, and it glowed like hot coal. "Eat as you wish, but remember, every blessing comes with a shadow." When David woke up, his room smelled like jollof. On the table was a pot filled with food. Nobody knew who put it there. He smiled. "God don't answer my prayer." He ate, forgetting the warning. And from that day, food began appearing for him out of nowhere, at home, on the road, even at church. People started calling him the blessed man. But blessing without discipline is like soup without salt. Soon, David became famous across Lagos. People traveled from Surale, Agege, and Mushin just to see the man who never went hungry. He grew so big that taxis refused to carry him unless he paid for 2 seats. But David was proud. "Do you know who I am? I'm the man food loves." Restaurants invited him to eat for free, thinking it was good publicity. He ate them almost out of business. The owners started warning each other, "If David comes, close early." Children sang songs about him, "Fatty Bom Bom, no de Belfort." Mama Ino grew worried. "David, this thing wey dey happen to you no pure." But David waved her off. "Mama, you no understand grace." He didn't know that the spirit of gluttony doesn't bless, it traps. One night, David dreamed again. This time, the old woman's face had turned dark like burnt palm oil. She held out an empty plate. "Eat," she said. David looked at it, there was nothing inside. "Mama, there's no food." She laughed. "You have eaten your future. Now your hunger will eat you." He woke up terrified, sweating and shaking. For the first time, there was no food on his table. His stomach began to rumble violently. He ran to the kitchen, but the fridge was empty. Even the neighbor's stew pot was dry. For the first time in years, David felt true hunger, and it scared him more than anything. Days passed, and David couldn't find food anywhere. People who once invited him now locked their gates. Mama Ino was sick, unable to cook. The market women hissed when they saw him. "Not that greedy man," they'd whisper. Desperate, David tried to beg, but everyone laughed. Oh! David chopped life don't beg for food. His pride wouldn't let him cry, but hunger humbled him more than shame ever could. He began to remember Baba Karim's warning, never eat beyond your hand's reach. At night, the old woman's laughter echoed in his dreams. Now you will know what it means to be truly full. One evening, while sitting weakly under the mango tree near the mosque, a stranger walked up to David. He was tall, calm, and carried a staff carved with cowrie shells. "Young man," he said, "I know what eats you." David looked up, weak. "I beg, just give me food." The man smiled sadly. "Food won't save you. Only humility will." He told David to travel to the River of Wisdom, deep in Ikoredu forest, and find a woman named Mama Ifo. She alone can cleanse your spirit. David hesitated. "But I no get transport." The man handed him a small calabash. "Shake it when you're hungry, but don't open it till you reach the river." Before David could thank him, the man vanished into thin air. The next morning, David set out barefoot. The road was long, dusty, and hot. He was tired, thirsty, and tempted to open the calabash many times. But he remembered the warning. He trekked past buses, traders, and shouting conductors until he reached the forest path. Inside the forest, birds sang strange songs. The wind whispered his name. At one point, he thought he heard the old woman laughing. But he pressed on. By sunset, he reached a river that glittered like melted silver. There, sitting under a tree, was Mama Ifo, a woman with eyes like the moon. Mama Ifo didn't look surprised. "I've been expecting you, David." He bowed weakly. "Mama, help me. I no fit control my hunger." She nodded slowly. "Open the calabash." When he did, instead of food, smoke poured out and formed the shape of the old woman, the spirit of gluttony. "You again!" David shouted. Mama Ifa raised her hand. "Quiet. You fed her with your greed, now she owns your stomach." She brought out 3 stones, white, black, and red. "Choose one," she said. David, without thinking, grabbed the biggest, the red one. Mama Ifa sighed. "Pride still blinds you." Instantly, the smoke wrapped around him, and he fell unconscious. When David woke up, he was inside a dark cave. Around him were giant pots bubbling with food, but every time he tried to eat, the food turned to sand. Voices whispered, "Eat, David, eat," he screamed, "Leave me alone." He realized he was trapped inside his own greed, the stomach of the spirit. Each pot represented a moment he took more than he needed. He cried out, "I'm sorry. I don't want to eat anymore." The cave began to shake. From the darkness, Mama Ifo's voice echoed, "Only truth can free you. Speak it." David shouted, "I was proud. I was greedy. I mocked my mother and forgot my blessings." The ground trembled harder. "I wanted to be known, not grateful." His tears fell into the sand, and wherever they landed, small yams began to grow. Then the voice said softly, "Now you are ready to be empty." The cave burst open, and light filled the space. David found himself back by the river, the calabash now full, not of food, but of clear water. Mama Ifo smiled. "Drink. Hunger is not in the stomach, it is in the heart." He drank, and peace filled him for the first time in years. David returned to Lagos thinner, calmer, and quieter. People were shocked. "Is that David Chop life?" they whispered. Even Mama Ino could hardly believe her eyes. He hugged her and said, "Mama, I'm home." He began helping her at the market, selling vegetables and cooking small meals. Instead of eating everything, he shared with beggars and children. People laughed at first, thinking it was an act, but soon they saw change was real. Lagos started calling him David Wisebelly. But the spirit of gluttony wasn't done yet. One night, during a festival, David was invited to a grand feast. Rows of food lined the tables like soldiers: egusi, jollof, grilled fish. Everyone said, "David, eat. You're our guest of honor." He hesitated, but his old hunger whispered, "Just one more time." He took one spoon, then another. Suddenly, the smell of the old woman filled the air. "Welcome back," her voice hissed. The food turned black, the lights flickered, and everyone disappeared. David found himself alone in darkness again. This time, he didn't panic. He knelt down and prayed, "I'm no longer your servant." A wind blew, and the darkness cracked like glass. The old woman appeared one last time. "You think you can reject me?" she growled. David stood tall. "I don't reject you, I've learned from you. Greed was my teacher, but I've graduated." He poured the calabash water on the ground, and it burned like holy fire. The spirit screamed and vanished into smoke. The fire spread, cleansing the air. When it cleared, David was standing back in the festival hall, surrounded by food and laughter. But this time, he wasn't hungry. David became a legend again, but for a different reason. People came not to see how much he could eat, but how much he could give. He cooked for orphans, shared meals with beggars, and taught children about contentment. "Food is for strength, not for pride," he'd tell them. Mama Ino smiled often now. "My son don't learn sense," she'd say proudly. And truly, Lagos felt his change. Even the air around his house smelled of peace, not stew. One afternoon, Baba Karim visited. "Oh, David Wisebelly," he greeted. "I hear say you don't conquer your demon." David laughed. "Baba, no God oh." Baba nodded. "Remember, balance is key. Even water too much can drown a man." He gave David a small charm. "Keep this, so hunger no go find your spirit again." David thanked him and tied it around his wrist. He didn't know it would soon be tested again. A rich businessman from Victoria Island heard of David and came with a proposal. "My restaurant needs someone who can eat and promote my food. I'll pay you millions." David smiled politely. "Thank you, sir, but I no fit return to that life." The man laughed. "Oh, you be famous again." David shook his head. "Fame fed my pride. I'm full of peace now." The businessman left angry, calling him a fool. But David felt light, as if he had dropped a heavy load. Soon, others began to copy David's way. Market women stopped wasting food, families began sharing meals with the poor, and people joked less about greed. The story of David spread far and wide, how a man's belly once ruled him, but wisdom set him free. Children sang a new song now. "Wise belly, no day swell, good heart, go day well." Even Mama Ifo, far in Ikorodu, smiled when the wind carried the song to her heart. To celebrate a year of peace, David organized a small feast, not for himself, but for the hungry. People from all over came with food, music, and laughter. He stood before them and said, "I once believed joy came from eating. Now I know it comes from sharing." They all clapped, and even the clouds seemed to dance. The air smelled sweet, not of greed, but of gratitude. That night, David dreamt one last time of the old woman, now smiling kindly. "You have finally cooked your destiny well," she said, and disappeared forever. Years passed, and David became known across Lagos not as the fattest man, but as the wisest. Children would point and say, "That's the man who defeated hunger." He lived a long, peaceful life, teaching others to eat with humility and live with gratitude. When he finally passed on, they buried him near the mango tree where he once begged for food. On his tombstone were the words, "He fed his body and lost his soul, but fed his soul and found peace." And so, my people, remember this: greed may fill your stomach, but it will empty your spirit. Eat what you need, give what you can, and your life will always be full.